don't we go ahead and get started? So I'm glad you could join us this afternoon. I'm Cliff Lynch. I am the director of the Coalition for Networked Information, and I will be briefly introducing this session. This session is one of the synchronous breakouts that are part of the Spring 2021 CNI virtual member meeting. We spent yesterday and today doing these synchronous project briefings, and we'll have 3 more of them this week at 4 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. I do want to note that for this spring meeting, we are relying much more heavily than in the past on pre-recorded sessions that are available on demand to complement the synchronous sessions. And on Monday, we released quite a number of those pre-recorded sessions. You can access those through Sched, and I think you'll find some rather interesting things in there. Next week, we will be doing on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday a few plenary day presentations, which will conclude the spring virtual meeting. I do want to note that this session is being recorded, and the recording, along with all the other recordings, will be publicly available at the conclusion of the spring virtual member meeting. A few mechanics. There is a chat box. Please feel free to use that to make comments, introduce yourself, whatever you like. There's also a Q&A tool at the bottom of your screen. You can use that to tee up questions at any time during the presentations. After we're finished with the presentations, Diane Goldenberg-Hart from CNI will help to moderate a Q&A session, and we'll answer as many of those as we can. We also have the capability, if people raise their hands during the Q&A session, to enable them to ask questions by voice if it's something a bit more involved. There is a closed captioning tool available if you want to avail yourself of that. And I think those are all the things I wanted to say about mechanics. So let me move on and introduce this session. So we have 2 speakers, Elisandro Cabada and Bill Mischo, both from the University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana. I think Bill in particular is well known to the CNI community. He's been an active contributor for many years and done a lot of really interesting things. The topic today is a platform and a project called Project Komodo, which the library at Champaign-Urbana has been rolling out to try and really start seeing the adoption of VR at some scale. VR is one of these technologies that's fascinated people for 20 years, but has been astoundingly resistant to really rolling out at scale at most of our institutions, and has long suffered from what I'd call challenges of infrastructure of various kinds. So I'm going to be very interested to hear the experiences and the strategy of the UIUC library in that regard. And with that, let me just thank our speakers for taking the time to share this with us. And I'll turn it over to Elisandro to lead off the presentation, and I will disappear. Over to you.
Thank you, Cliff. Thank you, everybody, for the opportunity to talk with you today about Project Komodo. I apologize for not having my camera on, but I was experiencing some latency issues. I want to make sure that nothing disrupts the flow of the presentation today. So thank you for the introduction, Cliff. So as mentioned, we're going to be talking about Project Komodo, which is, here's our catchphrase here is catalyzing browser-based virtual reality teaching and learning in the library. So this product came out of trying to overcome many of the challenges that Cliff mentioned, and many we will be discussing today. So quick introductions. My name is Elisandro Cabada. You please call me Alex. I am currently interim head of the mathematics library here at Illinois. I'm medical and bioengineering librarian, faculty in the Grainger Engineering Library and Carle Illinois College of Medicine, and I'm involved with a number of technology committees, spaces, and services in the library, but also across campus. And my colleague, Bill, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. Looking at the attendees, there's a lot of people we know. I'm Bill Mischo, the head of the Grainger Engineering Library. I also hold the Berthold Family Professorship right now emeritus in Information Access and Delivery. Go ahead, Alex.
Thanks, Bill. So there are three really important individuals who are not here today, but they are our Komodo team. So they are the ones who did all of the hard coding, and they were a tremendous value. I cannot understate their contributions. So that would be Robert Wallace there on the left. He is the operations manager in the Idea Lab and also the Komodo team lead. And next to him is Brandon Dang. He is the Komodo project manager. So he does a lot of the wrangling of students and also liaison with faculty in developing the main modules, which we'll be talking about today. And then David Tamayo, who is our Komodo Unity developer and a PhD student in education. VR is very much part of his PhD work. So Project Komodo is an application that came out of a grant, internal funded grant here at Illinois a little over a year ago before the pandemic. It was about approximately $70,000 that was set aside of part of a larger grant to develop this application. We'll talk a little bit about why we decided to build this. So this is a kind of an ecosystem of what Project Komodo is. It's an immersive teaching and learning platform. It utilizes what we call domain modules. Another way to look at this is subject modules. So those are modules that have content that's specific to a certain discipline, a certain subject area, a certain lesson. The Komodo has a core development team, which I just showed in the slide before, but the way we intend to support this platform to scale it up moving forward is to do what we're calling crowdsource development. So working with development partners to build onto Komodo. We'll talk about that in a bit. Komodo is accessible from a web portal. As a result, it's browser-based. It has a lot of functionality for social VR, allowing for multiple users in the same environment and being able to engage with each other in multimodal ways. Their accessibility is important to us because we want to make sure we're not creating more barriers to virtual reality. We want to break those barriers and be very mindful of them. And then lastly, we are incorporating some data capture elements so that to allow for some type of evaluation and assessment of the students' performance within the VR experience. Not so much to grade them on their contributions or how they've engaged, but to provide the instructor with feedback as to how engaged were students with their content while they were in VR. We think that's going to be incredibly valuable to our instructors. So we've learned in the last year that there's been some lessons learned from remote learning during the pandemic. So VR or immersive teaching and learning platforms kind of have helped meet some of the issues that tools like Zoom, as we're experiencing now, have created. And by that, I mean, we need more multimodal tools for teaching and learning. So we need something that goes beyond Zoom, beyond kind of the Brady Bunch panels on the screen that are not very engaging. They're not very immersive. You feel kind of separate. Siloed and isolated from everybody, even if there's 30 or 50 people in the same Zoom session as you. We believe that immersive teaching and learning platforms like Komodo can provide that additional additional layer of and functionality for engagement with your peers. Unfortunately, most VR apps that are developed right now are being developed for the gaming market. That's not a surprise. That's kind of where the technology got started in many ways, or at least became popular in the last 5 years. It's a tremendous market right now. There are VR apps being developed for education purposes, but those that do exist are very limited and they're for very specific use cases. So if you have a use case in mind for your subject area, if you can't find one that fits your very specific needs, you're kind of out of luck. Those VR apps that do exist, they have very limited functionality, even particularly the free ones, even the paid ones as well, I've noticed. And there's almost little to no customizability. So if you want to customize a VR app to your specific subject or lesson needs, there's very few options for that right now in the market. And of course, the last but not least is that a lot of these VR apps, especially the really good ones like Induvo for medical education, they incur a considerable cost. Some of these for the annual license can be upwards of $60,000 for limited numbers of users. So they're not cheap. And then they also have very restrictive licenses. So if you're trying to scale this up to a course, to a department, and certainly to a college or university, it's very difficult to do so right now with the existing VR apps. And all of this creates barriers for scalability. So if a department or a college or university wants to support their departments with VR applications, it's really difficult to do it with these commercially available tools and apps right now. So I mentioned the domain modules. This is kind of where Komodo comes into the scene. So right there on the right is the web portal for Komodo, and you have your list of courses, and you can create more of them. You can create labs using what we call domain modules, and then I'll have some examples of what we mean for domain module in a second. But essentially, an instructor can create a custom VR experience, bringing in their own media. It's available from a web portal, so they can use this browser-based web portal to create that VR experience that then other students can join them in at the same time. If there's not an existing module, media, or functionality that meets the needs of an instructor, there's the potential, because we control the development of the platform, to customize the source code to add additional functionality. So unlike third-party platforms where you're kind of you're at their mercy as to whether they want to for the development of the app. With Komodo, because we control it and it's kind of crowdsourced developed, there's a lot more options to customize the functionality and add more. And it does not require significant programming or coding experience, particularly if you are just using the existing content. You don't need any coding or programming experience. It's used the GUI to drop in media and add other functionality. There's limited funding and expertise available. So what I mean by that is that, of course, to develop a custom VR app is quite expensive. As I mentioned, to develop the core functionality of Komodo has cost us around $90,000 over a period of 1.5 to 2 years. So it's not inexpensive. It's also, there's limited expertise available. Even at a university at the scale of Illinois, there's not that many programmers available that are available. They may already be tied to other projects. They may already be employed. They may not be interested. So there are only so many programmers that are going to be available to you. And what we find is often multiple projects are kind of competing for the same individuals more and more. But with Komodo, because a lot of that core functionality that allows for synchronous users in the same VR experience engaging with media, that core functionality is already built for you. So if you do get funding, you don't have to use it to build the functionality that every VR experience needs. That's already there and available for you, which allows you to then focus on your very subject-specific needs. So that image on the right is a screenshot of Komodo from the browser view, and those are 3D designs of dresses that students in a fashion critique course have developed. And then I'll talk about that use case in a second, but they were able to then focus on incorporating the 3D models of those dresses into the virtual environment. They didn't have to worry about building the environment around them, building the functionality for students to be in the same experience. That was all already available to them. And of course, it allows them to kind of incorporate subject-specific media and functionality. So I believe most of those stresses on the right were first created in Tiltbrush and then exported and imported into the Komodo instance itself. So would this crowdsource development model work? Is there any interest in VR? Is VR a fad, basically, is how I'm positing it. So a quick stat here, according to Statista data, the global AR, VR, and mixed reality market is forecast to reach 30.7 billion just this year alone. A lot of that was driven by the pandemic and needing things to do at home, but that's a pretty tremendous amount. And it's forecast to hit up to 300 billion by 2024. So the technology's here to stay. There's a lot of money in it. That's usually a major driver to make sure for longevity. For here at Illinois in particular, we had seed grants. I mentioned the 70,000 for programming. We also had 88,000 set aside for funding grants. We funded 17 seed grants. And from the VR app, from the applications we got for those, we got over 63 applications. So about 52% of those applications came from faculty. Second largest amount was graduate students, staff, undergrads, other researchers. So we had a lot of varied interests. And then on the right there, you can see that the majority, the three largest contributors for departments were the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, the Grainger College of Engineering, and the Geese College of Business. But there's representation from all departments. So it's a very interdisciplinary, there's a very interdisciplinary interest in VR right now. Just another view, over 40 departments were represented in those 63 applications. So tremendous interest from all over campus. Journalism, informatics, anthropology, chemistry, college of media, English, entomology, it runs the gamut. We were quite surprised by this. From the users themselves, I do a number of workshops, before the pandemic at least. From everyone who participated, and when we surveyed them, there was a lot of interest from undergraduate students, a lot from PhD students, which I found a little interesting. I was not expecting that, but a lot of grad students, staff, faculty, and some retirees. And when we surveyed them as to why they were at what was the goal for them at that workshop, is they just wanted to learn about VR and they wanted to have fun. So, which is what we want to see, because as we'll learn in a bit, the library is kind of one of the last informal learning environments in academia. So this is really nice to see that they felt like they can come and learn about a new technology in the library, which is great, because it can be very intimidating. One last graph here is just the departments that the participants were from. A lot of them for the College of Engineering, because that is the side of campus that our library is based out of. But again, Geese College of Business, College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, so it kind of maps with that other graph we saw, although the College of Engineering is over, obviously is a bigger chunk. But as we can see, tons of other colleges and departments were also represented. As I mentioned, the Komodos are accessible from a portal. So right there you see they're actually in the VR experience. They have the browser loaded in the VR experience, and then they just go to the URL and you can interact with Komodo through the browser available in the VR headset. So those the main modules that I mentioned. What we ask the faculty is that the content that you create is free and open source to the public, because again, this is a crowdsource development model. There's an easy to use GUI, and it's a one point of access. So if you're a college and you have 30 different VR apps that your departments are using, you don't have to try to manage access points for 30 different experiences. There's just one portal for it so it makes scalability a lot easier to implement. Because it is browser-based, if you look on the right there, that's for the material science course that I'll talk about in a second. But we're looking at Robert there, who's the Ideal App Manager. He is he's in the VR experience with Brandon, who's one of our other developers. But if you were a student who didn't have a headset, you can still interact with your peers there, which is nice. So Komodo is accessible for many network device from a compatible browser, and most browsers are compatible now. No downloads or software installation is required. So you don't need to have it plugged into a computer, and you don't need to try to side load applications onto the headset itself. So you don't have to use any of the space available on the headset. You don't have to try to figure out how to install apps on the headset itself. That can create a huge barrier for people who are not as technically savvy as others. And it's compatible with most 6-stop headsets, which just means that the current generation of headsets that allow for full tracking of motion in the VR experience, so Oculus and HTC and others, their browsers are compatible with this application. As I mentioned scalability before, because Komodo's not, because it's browser-based, it's accessible from a web portal. You don't have to install anything. It's not restricted to third-party platforms like HTC, the Valve Store, or a Steam Valve Store, or the Oculus Store. So you don't have to install or download anything. That takes away a huge barrier for a lot of people. It's open source and free, as I mentioned. It's headset agnostic, so it's compatible with most current generation and certainly moving forward because of the browser-based approach to it. And it's not required a high-end computer. So first generation of headsets that came out around 2016, you needed a very high-end GPU and computer itself. There were a lot of cables to manage. It was just like trying to install a VCR for the first time in the 80s is what I kind of remember the experience being like. I'm like, where does this cable go? It's just, there was just a lot of things to do to set up. Now the current generation of headsets, you put it on and you're ready to go. So the speed of innovation in VR, the reason why it's important to try to make them scalable is because this graph is actually about 1.5 years old, so it's already outdated. But as you can see, this is just a very small sample of all the headsets that were launched since 2016, and this doesn't include the Quest 2, the PSVR 2 that is rumored to be released in the next couple of years. HTC has over 23 headsets, and they're releasing another one. Google and Apple are also announced that are rumored to be releasing headsets. So the speed of innovation is pretty remarkable. And then a quick chart there at the bottom, that's just the three. We have several headsets, but we kind of adopted the Oculus series more. So the Rift, the Go, and the Quest, as you can see, total circulation for those up to February 2020. This is tied to an article I wrote, so that's why the data stopped around that point. They were used pretty heavily. So two Quest headsets were used almost 190,000 minutes through 23 checkouts. So we tried to encourage semester-long loans for those when the pandemic started. So pretty interesting. Just a quick ecosystem there of the headsets that we have available here at the Grainger Engineering Library. But these are from the top to the right, up and down. These are kind of how the technology was released, starting with the Oculus Rift in 2016, and then the Pro, the Vive Pro, the Go, the Rift S, the Quest on the bottom, the Valve Index, and the Quest 2, where we are now. So you can see a lot of things have remained the same, but the headsets have gotten much better, much more portable, much more adoptable in the last just 5 years alone. So a lot of hardware, and again, this is not all of them. If I would not be able to fit all of them just from the last 5 years if I tried. But because Komodo is browser-based, it essentially kind of takes that problem out of the equation, because as long as we can adapt the Komodo platform to be browser compatible, it will be future-proof in many ways. Oculus is dominant currently in the consumer market. That's because HTC has largely focused on enterprise headsets, and they've essentially pulled out of the consumer market. They don't want to compete with Oculus. Google and Apple, as I said, are rumored to be developing new headsets. Hopefully that means that Oculus gets some competition, because they need some competition to keep the technology moving forward, and so that they keep the price point down. Many VR, some of the other issues for scalability is that many VR apps are exclusive to one platform or another, and then even when they're available through Oculus, sometimes they're only compatible with the Rift S as opposed to the Quest or the Quest 2. So, and that's because you have to install things on the computer and tether the headset, or you have to install things on the headset. So again, the browser-based approach kind of helps overcome those challenges largely, which. As I mentioned, the social VR aspect is really compelling. Essentially, the conferencing functionality. A lot of the things I've encountered with Zoom personally is that it feels very impersonal. So even though you're looking at, like I said before, you can be looking at 30 people on the screen and you know them and you're all laughing and you're engaging with each other. Something about not being in the same physical or even virtual space, I think, just takes away the just intimacy of just being around other people, which we know after the last year is really important just for our own development and for our own mental health. So we think that we wanted to make sure to provide as much engagement functionality into Komodo as possible. So that includes voice, chat, and screen sharing. So you can kind of see it on the right where you can chat with somebody. That panel is selected right now, but you can also quote unquote call them. So you have a video call with them and you can do screen sharing. So it's kind of nice. And again, this is available if you're in the headset or if you're out of the headset, so that if students don't have access to the headsets or the right headset in some instances, that they're not left out. They can still engage. They don't get the same immersive experience, but they're essentially still at least have some amount of interaction with their colleagues, which I think is important. We don't want to marginalize communities or create any more barriers. We want to make sure to be going in the other direction. And this functionality allows us, as I said already, they can interact within the headset or just from a network device, so from your phone or from a computer or laptop. And yeah, I think that shared social experience is really important. Just in a social environment, just for fun, but also in an educational environment. There's something about being in this. There's some pedagogical advantage to being in the same space as your peers. It makes engagement with them, makes the learning better. And I'm pretty sure there's a tremendous amount of research that supports that. Accessibility, users can engage with or without the VR headsets. So we think that's a major plus of the accessibility of the application, but also speech to text is something we're testing. So right now it will record everything that's said, and I'll talk about the data privacy issues in a second, because we know that's a thing that librarians are particularly concerned with, rightly so. But speech to text we think has huge potential for accessibility and potentially going in the other direction. Text to speech, and both of those are available through Azure Cognitive Services, which is a tool that we're using currently right now with Komodo to allow for speech to text, but it also gives you the ability to go in the other direction. So we think that's something we want to explore, again, to improve the accessibility of the platform. And in future work, this is more about the technology itself, but something we want to explore is just hand tracking. So if you can't grip the controllers for whatever reason, the Oculus Quest right now, the Quest 2 have something called hand tracking. So the cameras on the headset will scan your hands and detect them, and it'll generate virtual hands in your experience that then you can interact with the environment. The bigger problem right now is that the technology is kind of, again, ahead of the software because you have to program the functionality of hand tracking into the VR experience as well as the hardware. So that's we hope that as the technology and the headsets are adopted more and more in the commercial environment, that more and more applications will have hand tracking built into the experience, and we hope to incorporate that into Komodo as well. And then if you do want to use the controllers, just thinking of applications for haptic feedback. So you have special gloves or controllers, and you get the physical sensation of objects you're interacting with in your physical and in your virtual environment. So just imagine if I was visually impaired, but I wanted to read a book with a braille item in the virtual experience. If I was able to do that with haptic gloves, I think that would be tremendous towards the accessibility. And then there are a lot of other applications we can think of for that type of tool. Data capture, of course, as I mentioned before, the Komodo right now allows for capture of data during sessions. And what we mean by that is primarily it's tracking the movement of the headset and the controllers for each user in the virtual session. And we think, again, this is not so much to grade the students. In fact, we're going to discourage that. It's more to evaluate and assess the students' engagement with the virtual experience and content. It tells me as an instructor, like, how interested were they? Did the headset even, did students even move the headset or controllers? Does that tell me that they're not actually engaged with what I'm showing them or teaching them? And what can I do to change that? And we're very interested, of course, in protecting the privacy and data for our users. So the platforms we're using are using industry standards for data protection, and we're making sure that we are in compliance with FERPA, so no one can get access to that data. Aside from the student, if they want to see their own information, and if they've agreed to allow the instructor to, that they would have to sign a release for that. And this is kind of out of place, but I added this last second because it's really important and I almost forgot about it, but kind of tied to data capture is that you can record the sessions within the VR. So if you do a lab for an hour and you have students who are unable to attend, if you're because they're, for whatever reason, they were not available, they didn't have a headset maybe, or they were in another part of the world where there was a different time zone, you can record the session, send them a link, and they can view it online, which is really nice. So it allows for that asynchronous viewing, asynchronous teaching and learning. And then that's just some of the, that's just the part of the platform that gives you information on sessions and assets and interactions and data captures. For the technology itself, kind of a lot of boxes there on the right, but that's the workflow right now for how Komodo works. Pushing it towards the VR client, the web portal, the browser, the relay server, data pipeline for the data collection, the CDN. But primarily in its current phase, Komodo will provide out-of-the-box features like runtime model imports, real-time voice, text, and video chat, social VR, avatar presence. So you're represented by an avatar. It's not lifelike right now. And what we do, we are concerned with making sure we have the availability of diverse avatars, so that if I want an avatar that represents me, and whatever that means to me, I will have options to change the color palette of the avatar or any multiple other features. So we are thinking of that. That's kind of another accessibility feature too for us, because we want to. It's important for even when you're in the VR experience that you feel represented, and of course data analytics for the assessment and capture of the data. Some of the core, the platform uses the WebXR framework, used to be WebVR framework for the application and networking. We're trying to incorporate Unity, and then the WebXR framework, custom relay API, custom build server. For the runtime imported models and domain modules, we use GLTF currently, and then we're trying to also incorporate Unity asset bundles in the future. That actually is probably a few months old, so I think we've made some progress in that as well. For web portal metrics pipeline, some of the tools and applications are React, Vue, Python, and of course, MySQL. Leave that for a second because I know it's a lot of information, and then we will be sharing the slide deck after if you want to look at the information closer. So some use cases, and I've kind of already talked about them. This is Andre Schleifer. He's a professor in the material science and engineering department. He teaches a course, and he wanted to be able to show visual representations of what he calls the Miller indices. And other content for his course in an immersive environment. So we tested this out with him this past fall semester. So he was really happy with it, and he's on sabbatical now, but moving forward, we intend to support his course and build more functionality into his module so that other material science and engineering faculty or anyone interested in having similar content available to them can use that module for their own teaching and learning, which is nice. And the second use case that I'll talk about is the fashion illustration course. So you can see on the right there, somebody using a headset, and they are, and it's being projected onto the screen behind them. These are 3D models of dresses that were, or outfits that were designed by students. And the idea here is that your peers go into the VR experience with you, and then you get critiqued on your outfit. Other examples of the images on the bottom left there as well. So it's the assignment there is critique in a virtual experience. So this is for Professor Chiara Vincenzi, and she's very interested in more immersive and engaging ways to evaluate students' designs, not only for the peers to look at it, but also for the students to look at their own designs in the VR environment to see, before I actually put the work into like fabricating this outfit, can I look at the design in the VR experience, and I get the perspective of standing in front of it and walking around it, and I'm at the right height with the dress, and then I can see, get some ideas of how I can iterate on the design and change it before I put the work into actually building that dress in reality. This was done this past spring and summer. Other future directions, kind of aligning with that crowdsource development, is that we have a large, well, it was suspended temporarily because of the pandemic, but Illinois has a large computer science virtual reality course. It's CS 498 VR. So it's taught by 2 faculty. It's a huge course of 40 to 50 student-led project teams. This is kind of like a capstone course. They try to get real-world projects for companies or faculty or anyone who wants a VR experience built. That way the students get to develop something that's actually going to be used. They use Unity primarily. 400 students, 40 to 50 student-led teams. So teams have multiple students in them. So what we are thinking of moving forward is that so that students don't have to spend time and energy programming the core functionality of each application they build. They can just use Komodo, and that has that basic platform already built for them. That way they can focus on the specific needs of the assignments or of the sponsor or customer. So we think that that's a model that's probably going to be a sustainable way for us to support multiple modules moving forward, and also provide the students with a very unique experience, a very real world experience that they can then build something for a portfolio. And if they are looking for a job in the future, they can just send the link and say, I helped build this module, give me a job, Steam, or give me a job, Oculus. So we think, we're excited for this potential. Once the pandemic is over, we hope to partner with the class to use this model moving forward. So just kind of tying everything together, is continuing development, building more domain modules. So we hope to scale up over time. And one of the ways is we submitted NSF research on emerging technologies for teaching and learning grant this past January. That was to fund three modules. So to be competitive, internal to Illinois, faculty or other students and staff and researchers can submit. We'll be able to submit a proposal to get funded for up to $85,000 for a 3-year period, one-time grant. And then they can build something with the understanding that it has to tie into Komodo and then be available to the public once it is built. We're also funding an immersive scholarship applications developer who will liaise between the projects and with the Idea Lab team to build those modules, and also build additional functionality on the core platform itself. So we hope that gets funded. If not, we're going to continue looking for other funding. So because we think that's the model to scale up the platform over time by securing more funding and by working with campus development partners who get their own funding, so that they don't have to spend the precious resource of money that they have on building the core functionality. They can just use Komodo and focus their time and energy and money on their subject-specific needs. An end goal is to have this be a campus-wide service here at Illinois, but certainly we want to release a free and open source SDK for use by the public, because we want everyone to be able to use this and install an instance of this platform at their own school or their own organization, and then their faculty, students, and staff can build their own modules off of that. The SDK will be built with the idea of it being really easy to install, so very minimal expertise hopefully will be required for that. So that is currently underway now. But if you're interested in a demo, being an early beta tester, or being a development partner, please email me. So quick summary, what is the Komodo platform? You can instantly deploy a VR classroom session. You can manage those sessions with the web portal. You can upload models or media, so 3D models, video files. We're incorporating other content such as browser instances and Excel files, things of that nature. That's currently being explored right now. And the platform gives you the ability to capture data and then evaluate to analyze student asset and session statistics. So it lets you look at how your students are engaging with your content as an instructor. Komodo is going to be ultimately an SDK and a web service. So it's going to make it easy for our own faculty here in campus to deploy their own VR experiences, but also open to the public as well and allow others to do the same thing. So it will be open source and a sandbox. And we hope that it becomes a catalyzer just for instruction of VR moving forward, certainly at Illinois, but hopefully across academia so that other institutions, even if they build their own platform, kind of get the idea like, well, why don't we do this? We can build our own thing. That way we can do a similar browser-based approach so we can promote the use of this emerging technology at our institutions. And with this, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Bill.
I'm going to give Alex's voice 1 minute rest here and talk a little bit about why the library, which paraphrased is, why should the library be engaged in developing this campus-wide infrastructure for VR-related instruction and research? We think there's a couple of good reasons for this. Actually, this is a question we hear more from librarians than we do from disciplinary or subject teaching faculty. So the answer to this is that, at least in our case, libraries are the most visited facilities on campus. These are stats for the Grainger Engineering Library, but there are times during the semester, if you look at simultaneous wireless connections within a building, that the Grainger Engineering Library is the busiest building on campus. It's really the sort of ultimate manifestation of this idea of library as a place, which we've all talked about for years. Provides informal learning environment. We have spent a lot of time and effort on making the libraries into collaboratories, focusing on collaboration spaces, entrepreneurial spaces, innovation spaces. That's something we talk about a lot, particularly in terms of the Grainger Engineering Library. And so this is a natural for that. It's certainly a safe space for students to learn. We have a great quote we got from a computer science student last year who said that libraries are more important than the classroom. That this was a place where people learn. The collaboration that they do between students and the learning opportunities, the learning environments are extremely important. Of course, it's discipline neutral. We cover every area in the university and the values here include democratizing access to technology and concepts, which is something here that the libraries have been focused on. This is just another information literacy or just another teaching tool, and the library should be involved in that. And of course, you could argue that the libraries always have been involved with that. Okay, I'll turn this back over to Alex.
Thanks, Bill. So we kind of get an idea of why the library is involved with this, but why virtual reality now? We all kind of have a sense of this, but I always like to kind of put it together in a slide just to remind myself too. And as Bill mentioned, and many times my own colleagues in the library are the ones asking us, like, why are we investing all this into VR, and why is the library involved? Why can't anyone else do this? So we kind of get an idea of why the library is involved, but why virtual reality? So it's been available for the last 30 years or so. With the device they called the Sword of Damocles, which is this massive ceiling-mounted, more of an AR headset. It was essentially it became too heavy to be adopted in the commercial market because most buildings couldn't withstand the weight. There was a Nintendo Boy back in the 90s. I like to use that instruction to date myself with the students because they don't remember the Nintendo Virtual Boy. But VR has been around for a while. But really, since 2016, VR has become more affordable, scalable, and adaptable. And we saw that previous slide where it's like 8 or 9 popular headsets just from 2016 alone. So VR is increasingly being integrated into research and instruction in general, as we saw with the interest and seed grants and in attending workshops and in our own experiences at our institutions. We know VR is a big thing now. And these technologies extend the lab in classrooms, so you're not limited by just your physical space and what's physically available to you. You can essentially reach any virtual world as long as the application's available or you can develop it. But you're no longer limited by space. It provides faculty and students with virtual environments and generates discipline-specific simulations. So if you wanted to go to Chernobyl to look at the control room, you obviously can't do that now, but if you can create a simulation of it when it was melting down, if you can teach your students about the issues around nuclear safety in a VR environment. And make it really immersive with sound and smoke and people running around. And I think we all agree it makes learning more visceral, more engaging, and more immersive. So it's just not the 2D screen experience. You're actually actively involved in it. It surrounds you. And why now? Why VR? Why the library? Why now? Design thinking pedagogy has been in academia. I think I started talking about it with Bill and other colleagues when I started in the library back in 2007. And certainly that's accelerated in the last decade or 5 years. Certainly we see that in almost every department now has some amount of design thinking, human-centered design pedagogy in their departments. Emerging technologies are more scalable and affordable, so 3D printing, of course, but VR, of course, in our example, it's cheaper, it's easier to use, it's more portable, it's more user-friendly. And scholarship is increasingly born digital and relying on that emerging tech to be built. So I think we're going to see a lot more research using VR, AR, and all these immersive technologies moving forward. And we have an opportunity, certainly, since I've been at least at Grainger since 2007, where I've seen with the reliance on born digital content or the emphasis on that, we've seen the reliance on book stacks, particularly in STEM, but other fields as well, has gone down. So those collections have been relocated to storage facilities, and we've had the opportunity to reimagine what the library facility, the space looks like. What can we do with the space? So it is all kind of aligned at the same time. And we certainly know that the pandemic has shown us that we have a very real need for multimodal tools right now. We need something more engaging. We need something beyond Zoom. So VR, I think, moving forward, there's going to be a new normal that's not going to be, we're not going to return to the way it was. Remote teaching, learning is going to be with us in some way from now on, essentially, moving forward. So I think VR has a way to make that a little more successful, since we see students are suffering right now with the quote unquote Zoom classroom. So are there ways to use this technology to make the experience better for them and to make it easier to teach too, because that's the other side of that coin. So if you have any questions, please let me know. Sorry, that's my virtual business card. We have our superhero cards. Feel free to email me. I'm happy to answer questions. Have a quick Zoom call with you. Have a chat. Thank you to a lot of other partners. This is not just us that did this. We got a lot of funding from technology services at our institution, and then we had a lot of partners. This is not even everybody, but this is a lot of the people that make this possible. So we like to thank them. If you have any questions, there's our website, the Grainger Engineering Library, the Idea Lab, which is located in the Grainger Library. And then Project Komodo there, that is a URL. You can visit it now. And then there's a link there if you want to become a beta tester. And if you want to just download the source code, it's available from our GitHub instance there, along with every other software that we've developed in Grainger. And we have a number of other tools that we've developed. So go ahead, go there, do a pull request. You can download it for free. Oh, I don't know how this got in here. So let's go back here. So yes, if you have, I think we have about 10 minutes. So if you have any questions, please let us know.
We have 3 good questions.
That's great. Thank you. This is really great. Thanks so much, Alex and Bill. It's really fascinating work. And we do have some questions, so I'm just going to get right to it. The first question has to do with privacy. Although you may have answered this question, but I'm not sure this may be related directly to Oculus, the use of Oculus. With Facebook's control of Oculus, Are there any privacy concerns? I have an Oculus Go and the firmware upgrades require an account creation with Facebook.
Yes, that has been a major concern for us, and we actually are hoping to release a survey to our peers. So you may see that soon across the listservs, where we hope to ask everybody what their thoughts are on that, so that we can present data to Facebook and say, this is not sustainable for us. If you don't give an exemption to us, there's really no way we can meaningfully continue supporting the Oculus platform right now. The suspicion is that the Oculus 2 was released at a much lower price point. I believe it was $200 or $300, which seemed really low. But they then announced that you would require a Facebook account. So that kind of made it was a very suspicious connection between the two, because they knew HCC was pulling out of the market. So we hope that we can that academia can exert enough pressure on them that they will have an education exemption, because there's still a lot of mistrust behind Facebook, and not only them, other platforms certainly, as far as the protection of student data. So that is a concern that we have at the present. I believe that I was unaware that the Go and the Quest 1 were requiring it. I know the Quest 2 from the beginning makes you create a Facebook account. So I'll have to look into that deeper. So
yeah, this is a huge issue that a lot of people are concerned about. So we're hoping that the pressure on Facebook will make them change.
Okay, great. Thank you for addressing that. Thanks for the question, Andrew. Next question is from Joan. Hi, Joan. Joan Lippincott asks, will you do any interviews or other assessment to confirm whether you're feeling that students without VR headsets can participate and feel like they're part of the social group as much as students with the headsets?
Yeah, so tied to the grant that we submitted to NSF, but we'll certainly do this without the grant, of course, is we're going to be doing a research study starting in the fall, where every course that we do support with a module, we are going to see if the faculty person and students are willing to participate in a research study, and that will be, interviews will certainly be part of that, because we do want to evaluate, like, if you don't have a headset, are you getting something out of this experience still, and what type of experience do you have? What is the benefits? And then is that going to give us information that then we can add to the functionality, or maybe pivot into how we're doing it? So no, certainly focus groups and interviews are going to be part of it.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the question, Joan. Okay, we have another question now. Can multiple students manipulate a 3D object in Komodo together at the same time, or is it limited to one person to manipulate at a time, assuming they're all wearing a headset? And how natural is the experience?
So what I would say is the first intent for us is that is something that we took into consideration. So the instructor will have their own version that everyone can see, but each student will have their own copy of it that then they can manipulate. But having groups being able to interact with the same object is something that we want to explore, because we were more concerned with individual students being able to have their own model to interact with. But because we want to have this be a social VR experience, kind of what I was emphasizing earlier, that having groups being able to manipulate the same object. There are a lot of technical issues that kind of make that very difficult, but that's definitely something we want to incorporate as well.
Okay, thank you. And Boyun has another follow-up question here. Would you say the Komodo platform significantly lowers the work required from instructors to incorporate 3D content and VR into their course? And could you say a bit more about what work is done by instructors versus what work is done by library staff to support it? That's a great question.
So it depends on what type of model. In the instance of Kiara Vincenzi's course for the 3D models from Tiltbrush, it was an object file that we supported. So using the web portal, you are able to upload, or import, I should say, that model into the VR experience itself, into the VR. So where the Komodo team comes into it is they have to provide for the functionality to import the media types into the experience. But like originally, I wanted a 2D browser panel so I can do library instruction in a virtual environment, or teach about VR within VR. Browser instances actually turned out to be very difficult, which kind of surprised me, but that is something we want to continue. So we want to continue making sure we can import and support as many multimedia artifacts as possible, because different subject areas have very specific media needs. Just thinking of DICOM files in medicine, those are the medical imaging files, something of that nature. And the second, well, I'm sorry, what was the second part of that? That was.
Could you say a bit more about what work is done by instructors versus what work is done by library staff?
Yeah, so it's essentially we do a consultation with them at first to determine what type of media file specific to their subject area that they want to incorporate, and then we determine if that's possible within the WebXR or the current platform. And if not, how do we provide for that functionality? But once we do provide for that, then the instructor can do it from the web portal interface. We're no longer involved in it after that point.
Excellent.
I would also add that one of the focuses of our work here has been on providing infrastructure so that people can build 3D objects using either open software or commercial software, and fairly easily get these into a VR environment.
Yeah, so again, the tilt example, that's like a 3D printable file actually as well. So right. It's you can use it in different technologies, which is nice. So you're able to incorporate quite a lot of media types.
That's sort of lowest hanging fruit that we're trying to get make available for people.
It's really tremendous how you've lowered so many of the barriers here. Congratulations, really interesting work. We still have a minute or two more. If there are any other questions, please feel free to type those into the Q&A box.
And I would encourage anybody who has questions or more in-depth questions to send us an email, and we're very happy to talk to you.
If you're interested in having a version of Komodo at your institution, we're not quite at the point to make that possible, but we are looking for early partners so that we can begin determining what is needed to make the SDK as portable as possible. So
right.
We're interested in early developer partnerships.
Terrific. All right. Well, thank you so much to our speakers today, to our attendees for joining us. I see we're close to the hour here, so I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording, but I think Alex and Bill can hang around a little bit longer and chat with folks. If any of our attendees want to stay with us, I'd be happy to enable your microphone after the recording ends. So with that, thank you all very much for joining us here at CNI, and we look forward to seeing you back in the days that come. Bye-bye.